If we stay on our course, we could look at a worldwide catastrophe.
Industrial agriculture is first and foremost a war against the earth, because it is a war against all species, since you're bringing war chemicals into food production, and all they're doing is killing.
We cannot fight nature. You cannot poison things to the extent that where you, quote, win.
It's a challenge to live in a world where our government cannot be counted on to defend us from an industrial food system that's actually making us sick.
Hopefully soon the planet will change. People should really learn about how to help your community and help yourself in life.
You can grow 100% organic, nutrient-dense food at warp speed, basically. This stuff will grow anything. There is a secret here that we've got to unlock.
What we've tried to do here is accelerate the regeneration of soil.
Well, I've done some testing behind your back. Okay, so you're doing in 4 to 5 days what nature would take
In about 400 years.
400 years. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Disrupting food, fuel, and fertilizer all in one little powerhouse. You're going to have a lot of pushback. I worry about it getting squashed before it gets out.
Yeah. You don't get points for doing the right thing, and that's the right thing. You just have to do it.
We're trying to change Girl Scout cookies so they're healthier. Right now we have at least 45,000 signatures.
Last minute, they decided that the representative was going to be in a meeting. They hung up on me.
You never know what could be happening there.
They're just called free share.
They're just not listening.
We just heard a rumor that we might lose our farm.
4:30 a.m., telephone rings. I knew it could not be good news.
Looking at the amount of heat that needed to be generated, I'm a little suspicious.
To say that we care about the future of this planet, to say that we care about the survival of our species, and to not take action is simply no longer an option.
Hopefully, we'll recover from this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a panel by Cultivate America on soil health and agricultural solutions. Today, we'll be hearing from a variety of amazing panelists, including Rob Herring, an environmental filmmaker and musical activist who most recently directed, produced, and wrote The Need to Grow, narrated by Rosario Dawson, winner of multiple Best Documentary Awards and seen in 175 countries around the world. He headlined the Rock for Nature concert in Berlin for 25,000 people with songs of health and eco-activism, and is the co-founder of Integrative Pediatrics, a platform to help families learn the options available for creating foundational health and wellness. We just showed a trailer of his latest film, and you can learn more or watch at theneedtogrow.com. Welcome, Rob.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. Thanks for sharing the trailer. Appreciate it.
Of course. We'll also have Coach Mark Smallwood joining us. Coach's professional experience has been dedicated to environmental sustainability, efficiencies, and conservation. He has been a resource to the global food system, focusing on organic agriculture as an answer to world hunger and climate change. Coach's long history includes consulting to the green industry, helping companies exchange chemical products with their organic alternatives. Coach was responsible for the initial development and execution of environmental restoration at Mom's Organic Market, a chain of grocery stores in the Washington, D.C. metro area. He later served as the Green Mission Specialist and local forager for the Mid-Atlantic region of Whole Foods Market. Later in 2010, Coach was chosen as the executive director for the Rodale Institute, where he had a 5-year tenure. And currently, Coach continues to be a recognized and effective resource for the agricultural sector, including the transition of farmers from conventional to organic certification. We're excited to have him join us at Cultivate America as well as executive director. Welcome, Coach.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Lana, good job putting this together tonight.
Thank you for joining us. We'll also have Megan Chen joining us, the founder and executive director at the Urban Garden Initiative. She's always been very passionate about environmental issues and was involved with many other environmental initiatives before launching the Urban Garden Initiative, including being an intern at Delaware Center for Horticulture's Urban Garden, helping to design and launch BioSpork, a biodegradable utensil company, and more. She currently serves as on the executive committee for the Sierra Club within Delaware and is a recipient of the Environmental Education Excellence Award by DAEE, Presidential Volunteer Gold Award, and Daily Point of Light Award. Aside from environmental projects, she's also super into creative endeavors, including art, writing, music, and more. Thank you, Megan, for joining us.
Thank you, Lana. I'm so excited to be a part.
So excited for the amazing panel we have here today. We have two more people joining us as well. We have Elizabeth Kaiser with her husband, Paul, who own and operate Singing Frogs Farm in Northern California, with a background in tropical agroforestry, natural resource management, and public health in the Sahel of West Africa, Central America, as well as Northern California. Elizabeth and her husband, Paul, had fresh insights into farming and as such developed Singing Frogs Farm's innovative model. Singing Frogs Farm is a multi-award-winning for their highly intensive no-till ecological management system. They have increased their soil carbon by over 300% while drastically reducing their water use and generating over $130,000 per acre in sales. Along with feeding her own community, Elizabeth's passion is teaching their model of resilient, small-scale, regenerative, no-till vegetable production. So exciting and so amazing. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and welcome to the panel. We also have, lastly, Gabby, who is joining us from Jones Valley Teaching Farm. And Gabby, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Gabriele Cameron. I recently graduated from high school in 2019. I've been with Jones Valley Teaching Farm since my 9th grade year through Farm Club. And then my 11th grade year, I joined their high school internship program. And shortly after I graduated, I went on to join the graduate apprenticeship program. Jones Valley Teaching Farm really shaped my view on agriculture and why it's so important to me. So yeah, I really am grateful and thankful for this opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's get started. First of all, I'd love to hear more about some of the people we have featured here in their organizations and the kind of work they've been doing. So Megan, I'm going to pass it on to you first to tell us a little bit more about the Urban Garden Initiative and the work that you've been doing.
Thank you, Lana. Yeah, so to give everybody a little bit more background about the Urban Garden Initiative, we are now an international 501c3 nonprofit that works or aims to inspire and empower youth to achieve urban sustainability through a gardening-based program. Just as a very quick, brief story about how we got started here within Delaware first, which is where I'm based, working to tackle many of the major food sustainability and food desert issues that are kind of prevalent here. After doing a lot of educational programs, working on bringing gardens into urban communities, we started kind of expanding, and now we have over 40 chapters worldwide, mainly led by youth within high schools and colleges, working to start gardens in their communities, working to tackle many of the same environmental issues, and doing workshops and programs and just various educational things as well.
That's amazing. We're so excited to have you joining us. Gabby, I'd love to also hear some more about Jones Valley Teaching Farm and the work that you've been doing and all of that amazing stuff.
Okay, so Jones Valley Teaching Farm is a nonprofit organization based in Birmingham, Alabama, and they use the power of growing food to transform and improve a young person's pre-K through 12 education experience. With Jones Valley, we build vibrant student-based teaching farms on school campuses, and what we do there is provide an environment where young people can learn, create, explore, and grow a healthy future for themselves and their community. I've had the privilege to be a part of that since my 9th grade year, and also be a part of planning. I learned, to make a short story, My ninth grade year, I joined the environmental science class, and I learned that they were newly building the high school site. And Jones Valley has 7 teaching farm sites, so they were just not building the high school site at my school. And so it was really nice to be a part of that and be a part of the prepping and the planning. And then for when the site was built, we started Farm Club, and through there we were able to learn all different leadership and life skills that we could take wherever we go, and also farming and culinary skills.
Wow, that's so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Gabby, I'd also love to hear about your path to how you got involved in organic, sustainable agriculture.
So yeah, we learned it. I got involved, like I said, my ninth grade year of high school. Once this farming site was built, I began joining Farm Club, and I would dedicate every other Wednesday to going out there and learning different farm-based skills and culinary skills. And many students would come out after school, and we'll learn the importance of farming and take away, also learn the different culinary skills and different culinary recipes, and how the food and organic foods help better our health lives and better our communities' lives. So through there, we also learned about food injustices. So doing that from my 11th grade year, my 9th to my 11th grade year, and then going into the internship, and then later becoming a graduate apprentice, to where I now work on all different other sites, and I get to see different churches and see the impact that it makes on their lives.
Amazing. That's such an amazing path. Coach, we'd also love to hear some more about your path. And I know you have had a little bit more years working in agriculture, but we'd love to hear how you ended up where you are now and some of the work you've done.
Well, sure. I think what's really important, and always has been to me, is my upbringing. This is where I learned how to grow food. I was raised by Eastern Europeans from Slovakia. They didn't know how to say the word chemical. And so I was taught how to compost, how to amend the soil, how to grow, harvest, and just as importantly, preserve. And I can remember, some of my earliest memories are as a toddler, in the farming situations with my grandparents, for example. And, in the dead of winter in February in Pennsylvania, when I would literally crawl into a storage space where we had cabbage, potatoes, carrots, other root crops covered with straw. And, because I was the little one, I got to crawl underneath there and take those items out for our meals. And having my grandmother send me down to the root cellar for apples in February so she could make an apple pie that tasted like we just picked them off the tree. I'm sure most of you understand that. That led me into teaching, coaching. I was a basketball coach for 18 years. That's why everybody calls me coach. But I continued to grow. I continued to have a passion for organic, left teaching and coaching and entered into the business world, and was lucky enough to be one of those people to make a living with your passion. And my passion has always been growing organic food and passing that information on to others. And that information includes, the extra food that I grew. I ended up working for a company that manufactured organic fertilizer, brought them into the United States from Canada. That really opened my eyes to the agrarian genocide, as I call it, the disappearance of the small family farm. And so I took over a small family farm that had been abandoned for 39 years. We raised goats, sheep, pigs, chickens, bees. I drove a team of oxen instead of a tractor. That led me to my relationship with Mom's Organic Market, my relationship with Whole Foods. I was a regional director there. And then, of course, on to Rodale Institute, where I was the executive director. I left there in 2015, and I've been consulting and helping people transition to organic, remove chemicals from their food production systems. And Cultivate America is now giving me a whole new platform, which is really nice. I love it. Thank you.
Welcome. We're honored, honestly, to have you. And I'll pass it on to Rob. We're talking about, when we're talking about these more sustainable food systems, a lot of what we're talking about is organic agriculture. And I want to know, why is organic agriculture so important?
Oh, I've disappeared. Okay, so yeah, as Coach was just mentioning, this idea of connecting to our food system in a way where we can honor, the soil and honor the food that's coming out of it, and the relationship that we have and what it does to our health and to our environment. So it's funny that organic agriculture has to have that preface of that word, because the fact is, organic agriculture is really just agriculture. And the burden should be on what we think of as conventional or common regular farming, regular agriculture. The burden should be there to be called chemical agriculture, because organic, as Coach was mentioning, and what he spent so much time on, is how to get people to transition back to the way that nature does things. And so we've seen, as there's a very simplified approach to farming at first, when we start using these chemicals to try to get higher crop yield and try to kill bugs and kill weeds. And I think farmers have unfortunately been lured into a really short-term promise of yields or results and effectiveness of these chemicals, because chemicals are strong, just like pharmaceuticals that we use on our own body, but at what cost? And it's that long-term health of the ecosystem that was providing food in the first place. So when we talk about the importance of agriculture, really what that means to be certified USDA organic, we're talking about, in the United States, is that it doesn't have those artificial chemical inputs. Now we're going to get hopefully more into the importance of soil and the role that plays in the carbon cycle, and how that has a bigger role in overall climate and environmental issues globally. And so it's important to note that while organic is really powerful as a first step, I think culturally, for us to understand that we just need to stop putting these chemicals on the land and then therefore into our body and into our ecosystems. We want to go one step further into how we're actually regenerating soil at the foundational level to build health, not just what we're not putting on these farms, but we're actually, what are we actually seeing as a positive feedback loop, so that we can undo the damage that we've done to rebuild a healthier planet. And it's all possible.
That's actually a perfect transition to our next part, which is talking about what soil is and what does soil health mean, which is, of course, the second focus aside from agriculture of this panel. So Elizabeth, I'd love to have you speak a little bit about what does it mean when we talk about soil health?
Awesome. What is soil? That's a big question, but also just soil is awesome. At least healthy soil is. Unhealthy soil is just truly dirt. Soil is 95% minerals, air, and water. And it's really that last percent, which we call soil organic matter, that is the truly amazing part. The soil organic matter is 57% carbon. It is the life, the decomposing life, the stored life. It's what makes soil awesome and amazing, able to take death and turn it back into life. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about soil health, and how we're going to do that. We're going to not disturb the soil. We're going to keep green plants in it, photosynthesizing as many as we can, and as many different varieties. We're going to incorporate animals into that system, and that's going to create healthy soil. They say that a handful of soil has more organisms in it than all the humans on our planet. But yet when we disturb soil, like say for instance in agriculture, when we're tilling soil, we're turning it, we're chopping up, what we're doing is we're breaking up the soil, we're bringing in more oxygen, we're volatilizing a lot of the good compounds that are there. We're releasing carbon and nitrogen. We're actually releasing quite a lot of greenhouse gases when we're doing that. And we're also destroying the ecosystems that are there that hold that life. So we are physically killing the life in the soil. But when we put green plants in it without biocides, without any sorts of herbicides or pesticides, those green plants, they're doing what they do. They're photosynthesize. They're taking the carbon out of the air along with sunlight. They're creating glucose. They're then transforming those glucose into a myriad of other carbon-based products. More complicated sugars, carbohydrates, amino acids, so forth and so on. And then the awesome part of that, I just love this, is that 40 to 60% of those products of photosynthesis are not actually used by the plant for its own growth and development, but pushed down into the soil to feed the biology. So those plants aren't trying to fight climate change for us silly humans that put all the carbon in the soil, but they're just trying to feed the life to create symbiotic relationships. And that is the means for feeding the soil, for getting healthy life, building that back up. And even from degraded lands, we can see that when you follow simple principles, you're feeding the soil, you're not disturbing it, you're feeding it via photosynthesis, you're getting rid of any sorts of biocides, you're incorporating animals. That's when we can have a regenerative system and start to grow healthy food that feeds us and keeps the planet healthy.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's a really informative answer. And Coach, if you have anything else you want to add to what soil is and soil health, I'll hand it off to you.
Sure, Elizabeth, that was really well done, well put. Soil is a living, breathing organism. I think Elizabeth alluded to that with all of the biology that exists. The simple act of photosynthesis, where plants capture carbon, sunlight energy, and water, and turn it into the compounds that Elizabeth talked about, proteins, carbohydrates, and of course, simple sugars. So let's take a look at that real quick. Protein would be eggs. Carbohydrates could be flour and simple sugar. So what can you make with eggs, flour, and sugar? Cake and cookies. And that's what green plants do. They put the ingredients into the soil that make cake and cookies for the microorganisms that live in that biozone around the root of the plant. A broccoli plant has its own special cake and cookies. So does a maple tree. So does a mugo pine. So does a tomato plant. And the microorganisms that like their cake and cookies surround that root zone and feed on party time. It's brownies and cake, and it's the best. They thrive there and create a biozone that protects the plant from disease, pests, and drought. That's the symbiotic relationship of photosynthesis, green plants, and healthy soil.
Honestly, Coach, I didn't think you would be able to add to what Elizabeth said, but you really did.
Cake and cookies. Cake and cookies.
Great message. I want to turn the conversation back to Megan and give her a chance to talk about her passion areas within sustainable agriculture now that we have a great introduction, and what specific areas she's focused in and interested in. So Megan, I'll hand it to you.
Thanks. I'm going to kind of tell a little bit of my story, which is similar in many ways to what Coach explained. But my kind of route within gardening and sustainable agriculture also started when I was really young. I lived in a really kind of small house where I didn't have, a large plot of land behind my house to be growing food and doing all of that. But I was always watching videos and just learning and kind of seeing and wanted to get involved within kind of gardening on my own. So when I first started, it was just a process of growing food in containers. And from that point on, I really found this true love of growing food, and it was just like so amazing in so many different ways. So when I moved, I got the opportunity to grow a larger garden on my own property. I started getting involved in various other organizations near me that are working on kind of urban agriculture, and was just learning so much. And at the same time, I was learning about how prevalent this problem of food deserts and food sustainability was in my own community. And I was like, it's crazy that the people around me, they might be interested in gardening, but within school, I've never learned how to grow my own food. I've never learned about agriculture. And how can we go about solving this food desert problem in urban cities without knowing any of these other pieces? So starting to be in kind of creating this sustainable agricultural movement for me was just teaching people who have pretty little to no understanding of gardening, but want to learn and want to understand, especially youth, and just giving them the opportunities and resources and chance to do so. So for us, it was, as I said before, bringing gardening into the classroom, into urban areas, kind of breaking this idea that gardening only has to be on these large plots of land, and you have to have large spaces to do it. So we brought container gardens right into the classroom, also being able to grow different vegetables and kind of using that as the seed of then teaching students, how gardening can be this fun activity, how you can just take, various materials that you already have at home, whether it's a bucket, whether it's a yogurt container that you've recycled, and turning it into a kind of container of sorts that you can use to plant food, and hopefully spurring that change and creating that seed for them to learn more about gardening and get more into agriculture and starting to, grow their own food and creating more of this local sustainable food movement.
Yeah, that goes to show you don't even have to live in an area where you have a backyard or a very rural area, right? Even in cities, there's always some way that you can get involved. And Gabby, I'll pass it on to you to also tell us about your specific passion area within sustainable agriculture.
So my specific passion area within sustainable agriculture would be education. Jones Valley really inspired me to continue to pursue a life in agriculture. So my plan is to be able to get back into school and major in agriculture leadership, education, and communication. And with that major, I would like to pursue a career as an international agriculture development specialist. I would like to travel to developing countries and help them with more efficient and sustainable ways of agriculture. The main goal is just to be able to improve food production, nutrition, marketing, and health in these less technically advanced countries, because agriculture plays a very, very important vital role in the economic development of these countries as well. And I guess just knowing that the crucial majority of these populations of these countries make their living from agriculture. So being able to provide assistance to the crop producers, helping them with resources and assisting them with research spheres and employing the latest techniques when it comes to controlling pests and facilitating diversity. That's just something that I'm really into and that Jones Valley has really pushed me towards, and just being able to be hands-on in the soil since my 9th grade year is just something that I really think that we should be able to push for everyone to really become hands-on in agriculture, which is really great. And then also, because education is such an important part of it, I know that I would love to be an agriculture instructor. That's what I'm really planning on doing. I want to do this in K-8 schools because, just like what Megan said, just being able to get these kids to understand what agriculture is and knowing that it's gardening and stuff is more than just being on a large plot of land, and teaching them ways to do this from home and letting them know that they have the opportunity and they have the resources to do these things is something that's really important to me. And I want to be able to somehow help them connect agriculture to whatever they want to do. And if they don't want to do agriculture, at least be able to leave them with the leadership and life skills that agriculture has provided for me.
Thank you. Yeah, education is definitely something we care very much about at Cultivate America as well, and engaging young people. And Elizabeth, when we're talking about agriculture, we're not talking about conventional agriculture, right? Not industrial agriculture. So how are your methods of growing different from conventional industrial agriculture?
Awesome, thank you. Well, if anybody's interested, you can definitely go like on Instagram and go take a couple of looks. Go take a look at a couple of pictures of our farm. We're very different. What we do is much more like gardening, sort of pumped up rather than what many people think of as large-scale farming. And actually, it's something that's more common throughout the world. So we have about 2¼ acre that we grow super intensively on. We feed about 400 families on that year-round. We are in Northern California, so I don't know where all of you are right now, but you might be thinking, oh, California, like you can grow anything there. We do have frost. We do, get down in the teens, not snow or ice or anything like that, but we definitely do have frost, and we'll go right through that. And what we end up doing is a lot of hand labor. So we're getting rid of tractors in the field, so we're not having to do tillage, but we're taking one crop out and we're getting the next crop in right away, so that we're going from one photosynthesizing plant, Rob, I'm going to steal this, making cookies and cake for the biology, down to the next one in a really quick succession. We're also planting lots of different things together. We've got about 90 different varieties of vegetables that we grow, everything from lettuce and carrots and tomatoes, to your broccoli and your Brussels sprouts and your chards and your collards and just keep going, tons and tons of different vegetables, and, we'll plant them together. So we'll plant, tomato plants and then lettuce plants all along the edges, or we'll have, at the end of our tomatoes, we'll start putting our winter Brussels sprouts along the sides of them. So lots of interplantings, lots of being intensive, sort of being more smart and using our body and employing people and educating people rather than using machinery. And so that's a little bit about how we do, but also just some of the things I talked about, healthy soil. Those are the things that we focus on, how is it that we don't want to disturb the soil? We want to keep as many plants photosynthesizing and making that cake and cookies. We want to, having as much of a diversity, and then getting that out to our community. About half of our food goes out through our CSA. That's a program where people sign up and they get a box of food from us every week. About half goes out to farmers markets, and 99% of our food stays within 15 miles of our farm. So we're really engaged with our local customers.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And if anyone wants to see more about the issues in industrial conventional agriculture and why we need to change our food systems towards these more organic, sustainable ways, we have several other panels and events that we've done on Cultivate America. If you just go through our Facebook or Instagram, you can see more about why this is so important that we transition our food systems. And now I want to get a little bit more into climate change, which I think is really exciting as a climate activist myself. And I'm going to pass it off to Rob first to tell us, before we get deeper into agriculture and its connection to reversing climate change, what exactly is carbon sequestration, and what does that mean, and how does that work?
Sure. Yeah. I'm not sure if I can answer it without getting into its relationship specifically to climate change. But the idea of carbon sequestration is that we're taking the carbon that is up in our atmosphere, right? We have this excess of emissions that we've been doing since the Industrial Revolution, and we just keep pumping more and more. And that comes from our factory farms, and that comes from our transportation, and it comes from even just tilling the soil. As Elizabeth was mentioning, it, the carbon that was locked in the soil actually becomes CO2 and just evaporates up into the air. So a lot of that carbon needs to return back to where it was, and it was once underground. So the idea of sequestration means to just pull it back down. And it's a really important point, because for a long time, as people were starting to become more aware of what climate change was and what emissions are, we see a lot of environmental organizations still today focusing only on emissions alone. So we're saying reduce emissions, reduce emissions, reduce emissions. But when we think about that, we have a certain number of parts per million. So out of 1 million parts in our atmosphere, what is a safe level of having something like CO2 in the atmosphere before it starts to have this greenhouse effect where it's warming and altering our climate. So we have passed the point of what has been recognized by scientists as safe. We have dramatically changed from about 280 parts per million before pre-industrial times to now, I think in May, it was somewhere around 417. The safe level was once thought to be 350, and we kind of blew past it. So when we think about just cutting emissions alone, that will do nothing for the excess load of atmospheric carbon. So how do we pull that back down? So that's what carbon sequestration really is all about. And where's it going to go? Well, it can go into our oceans, and oceans can handle a little bit, but they're actually acidifying at the rate at which they're taking in carbon right now, because there's just so much. It becomes carbonic acid, and it destroys a lot of life that's in the oceans and can erode coral reefs and things like this. So we needed to go back into living things on our landscape and back into the soils, right? So a lot of times we think about forests as trees can suck in carbon, but really it's going to be stored in our soils ultimately. So as we've been talking about photosynthesis, that's this beautiful solution that nature has given us, where plants breathe that in, and we just need to get the planet covered with as much photosynthesizing beings as possible, as fast as possible. And when we do that in a way where we're not then just breaking that carbon back out immediately, but we're maintaining the health in the soil after they've pulled back down, now we're talking about getting to drawing it down. So it's majorly overlooked in the climate conversation still to this day, even though a lot of people have been doing amazing work to try to bring this point up. It's almost eerie to see how many organizations are only talking about reducing emissions, not talking about drawing it back down. So when we're talking about soil here in this whole talk, if this isn't something you know much about, it could seem kind of nerdy, but soil is really, as I'll show on my shirt, save the soil, save the world. It is the #1 thing we need to be talking about, more than transitioning transportation, more than anything else. So to not even have it included in the conversation is very odd. We need to move past that quickly, because it actually should be the top part of any climate conversation. And the beautiful thing is soil will ripple throughout our culture in so many other beautiful, positive ways in terms of water saving and nutrient density and protecting humans and building biodiversity, etc. So I got a bit sidetracked because I'm a soil geek, but I hope people that are watching start to become soil geeks as well, because there's so much more to learn. There's more going on in the galactic complexities of our soils underneath our feet than is happening in our cosmos. And it's much more important than even looking to the stars, because this is where we live, and our life actually depends much more on that soil underneath our feet. So thank
you. Yeah. That's a huge area that we focus on at Cultivate America, right? That we know that agriculture is a source of massive emissions and climate destruction and growing emissions, and it can actually be a solution instead if only we did it right. So I think that's super important. And it looks like you have some comments that agree with you as well that we're getting. So I'm going to pass it on to Coach to tell us some more. Can we really reverse climate change? That sounds out of this world right now. Is that something that's possible?
It is possible. I think what's even simpler is a new T-shirt, Soil Geek. I mean, I think I could sell that. That's beautiful, Rob. In 2015, I had a white paper that identified, if you want to call it, regenerative organic agriculture as the answer to climate change. I took that white paper and I walked from Kutztown, Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. We called it the Walk for an Organic Planet. It was 168 miles, and I hand delivered that paper to the USDA. We had about a 2.5-hour meeting. They paraded everybody past us, and they were very gracious. But everybody's looking for, a magic bullet, a solution to this, and it's really not that complicated. Here's what we found out scientifically. if we transition the current cropland, we shifted it to regenerative organic agriculture, we could sequester 40% of the current annual emissions. And I understand emissions are just part of the program, but if we did that, we're talking 40% of current annual emissions. If we took global pastures and transitioned that to regenerative organic agriculture, we sequester 71% of the current emissions. So let's do the math real quick. 40 plus 71 equals 111. That's just not mitigating. That's actually reversing climate change. It can be done, but there has to be a global commitment and a global consciousness to this effort.
Thank you, Coach. And just for your business advice, it looks like some people agree. Just so you know, keep that in mind.
Okay, I'm making shirts tomorrow.
It's happening. Rob, I'd love to pass it on to you to talk a little bit more about compost as well and this big dynamic system we're talking about. And what's that, Ro?
Cool. Yeah, these are our organic shirts, actually. We donate to generate a square foot of soil for everyone that's shown. I don't mean to turn it into a plug. We also have a shirt about composting that says compost is cool. Maybe I'll grab it before we sign off here. But the importance of compost can't be understated, can't be overstated. And the reason is that we have so much food that is being wasted right now. And so what compost is right, we're taking organic material and turning it back into soil. So compost meaning like to decompose. And there are many different ways to do this. But the general idea is that we don't want things to be going to waste in landfill that are not waste. They're actually nutrition for our soil. They're part of the regeneration process. There's no waste in nature. It just doesn't exist. So it's a human made up concept. So how do we take the 40% or more of our food that we waste right now and actually turn it into part of the solution? So when you hear these staggering numbers of that, 40% of the food that we grow in the United States is wasted. It's people imagine this pile of food, and you can imagine 40% of that just going into a landfill, essentially. But we also want to think about the fact that that's 40% of the water that was used to grow that food, 40% of the human labor that was used, 40% of the carbon and electricity and energy and gasoline that was used to transport that, 40% of the pesticides that were put onto the soil that are now washing into our ecosystems unnecessarily. So we need to reduce food waste. That's a big part of it. But when we do have food that we're not using, we need to be returning it back to soil. And I live in Los Angeles, right in the middle of the city. I'm actually composting inside with something called vermicompost, which does use worms. And that may freak people out a little bit if they're not used to working with worms, but it's a beautiful solution that anyone can do. And if you're not going to compost yourself, the reason why we need to keep food out of our waste bins and going to landfills is because when they go to landfills, they start to degrade in a way that is off-gassing enormous amounts of greenhouse gases contributing to our problem. So it's not just CO2, but it's nitrous oxide and it's methane and all of these other more potent greenhouse gases. So we can take something that is one of the biggest causes of greenhouse gases and actually turn it into one of the biggest solutions. We can use that compost ourselves at home. We could give it to someone else who's a gardener. But whatever you do, you need to be finding people that are composting if you're not yourself, connecting with the community garden, asking people, are you composting? Can I give you my food scraps? Going to your farmer's market. Hey, will you take my food scraps? Or better yet, start your own compost pile. Because when you see that magic transition happen from waste back into healthy living soil, and you've created that and you've participated in that, you're going to be a lot more inclined to actually use that and start gardening more and more yourself because the nutrients are there. So there's a beautiful way that we can start to restore the life in soil. And that's what it all comes down to, the difference between it being dead dirt and part of the problem, and desertification, can't grow food in it, needing more inputs. And being soil is that soil has all that biology, right? It has all those microorganisms that we can't see with our naked eye, but that's the magic of soil and how it can regenerate our planet and feed us, is that we have to put that life back in. And compost is just full of these microbes. So you can think about it as like a probiotic that humans take for our own gut microbes. But compost is really like inoculating our soils back again with nutrients and with that beautiful life system that nature designed and intended. So we want to start to think in those cyclical processes and not just out of sight, out of mind, throw it away, but how do I turn this problem into a solution?
Thank you, Rob. And as someone who's been part of the climate movement for a few years, I actually noticed that there is mainstream support for composting, but not much talk of soil health. So if only we can make that connection happen, that soil health is very much connected and very much something we should be talking about more mainstreamly as well. I'm going to quickly pass it on to Megan and then Gabby again to tell us, I feel like they might agree on this, whether young people should be taught how to grow their own food and about soil health, and if this could be connected to climate education as well. So Megan, I'm going to pass it on to you first and then to Gabby.
Yes, as mentioned before, and I think many of the things that Rob had mentioned are so important for youth to learn. And I just want to bring in a couple of like quick stories of what happened when I was teaching workshops with youth, which is honestly one of the most amazing parts of running the Urban Garden Initiative, which was that the idea of, I guess, bringing these gardens into these classrooms, I never realized how much of an impact it had on students. And for many of these students that we were working with, it was literally their first time, like kind of playing with soil, seeing these plants. And, you know, sometimes in our workshops, we ask the question of, where does your food come from? And we've had answers from students before that are like, our food comes just from the grocery store. Like that's actually genuinely where they think their food is grown. Until we start, you know, showing them and bring these examples in, many of the students never realize, you know, how this plant turns into the food that they're actually eating. And even before I started getting more into kind of this like agricultural movement, I never even realized how much my personal carbon footprint is related to, you know, food and where the food is sourced, and just the difference between, you know, buying food locally versus having your food coming to you from thousands of miles away. And so without that education being brought to students, I feel like that shouldn't be something that they're expected to know either, which is the reason why we really want to show them, and we want to kind of ingrain these really important points into how all these different topics are related, and how, you know, then carbon footprints tied into climate. And that was one of the first workshops that we taught, which was the relationship between food sustainability and climate change, and how all these different issues aren't mutually exclusive, but actually all tied into kind of one big group. But yeah, overall, I just think it's incredible to see just students' faces light up when they're kind of being exposed to gardening and soil for the first time. And I just think it shows how many more students would truly kind of get involved in gardening if given these resources to do so.
Thank you, Megan. I'm going to pass it on to Gabby now to also talk about this.
Yes, so I agree with Megan. I do believe that the youth should be taught about soil health and how to grow their own food, because one, it just equips them with like many skills of life and also survival. And like Megan said, like and with Jones Valley and becoming a graduate apprentice, learning how to make lesson plans and taking these into the schools and teaching it to the students, like seeing the excitement on their face and hearing their questions about what we do and how food grows and the importance of worms and the different insects and pests. Like, I feel like them knowing this really plays a vital role in our future. And I definitely think that it connects to climate education, because it's important for kids to learn the importance of the climate and how it affects our everyday lives and what they can do, what actions they can take to help better the climate. And I believe that just like, since agriculture is such a big variety of things anyway, it can just really connect to education in all sorts of ways.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. I think we've emphasized this point several times that we just keep going back to education, connecting young people and teaching them these really important things from a young age. I'd love to pass it on to Elizabeth for a little bit to talk about how small farms and backyards can make a difference in terms of having more equitable access to foods and communities and being productive and successful as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. In terms of being productive, I think there's so much in here. I think that by being intensive, and it can even be a backyard plot, growing our own food is just so empowering to anybody. Being it, somebody just having a couple of boxes on the window or worms underneath their kitchen sink or, whatever that is. I also do think that growing in healthy, organic, sustainable, regenerative ways can be much more profitable even. Sometimes we're afraid to talk of money, and I don't love talking about money, but we do talk about how much money we make on our farm because it catches a certain interest, like, oh wow, you're actually doing the right thing and you're economically sustainable also, because honestly, things cannot be sustainable if there isn't the economic layer also. And we've been taught, you gotta be big or you gotta get out. But if you do things right, you are super intensive, you can be profitable. It's unfortunate that our system is set up so that large farms have subsidies, for instance, have lobbyists, for instance, and so it makes it more challenging for the smaller person. And I have so many different directions. Lana, could you help me? Did you want me to talk more about community stuff in this, or about productivity in this? Because they're very different directions.
I know, I really tossed you a lot of different topics there. I think community is really a great focus, because once you tell us it's productive and successful, great, we know, and we can check it out more. If you want to talk some more about community before we pass it on to the next person, that'd be perfect.
Fantastic. We need to feed our communities, and we need to keep our food local. That's really it. We don't want to be, growing tomatoes in summer and then nothing else, and having people import things from South America, or, for a lot of you, from California if you're on the East Coast, or from, God forbid, somewhere in Australia or somewhere across the ocean. Wanting to keep it local, wanting to feed our community is super important. And see, this is where I was getting confused, because there was another question, I think, on, community food justice. There are a lot of food deserts, as I think Megan was talking about before, and making the food available for those people is really challenging. And I'll be honest that our food system is broken in the United States because of what I was talking about before, the larger farms and the subsidies and so forth. And that makes it hard for small scale agriculture. And unfortunately, it often feels like, as the farmer, a lot of problems of the food system are put on the back of the farmer to fix. But there are ways that we can work with other groups. So for instance, on my farm, we collaborate with a couple of nonprofits, so that about 10% of our food goes to people who are on EBT or food stamps. And not only that, but they also have a match of 1-to-1. So they're only paying 50% of the cost that other people might be paying for that food. I do live in a rather affluent area, so most people don't mind paying, but we definitely have portions of our community that still live in food deserts, and getting food out to them is super, super important. And I believe that having smaller farms in our communities is one of the main ways that we can do that. We can engage people. They can know their farmers, or they can be taught, like Megan and Gabby are doing, they can be taught how to grow on their own. So there's so much there. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and honestly inspiring, because I know there's so much in that question and so much in those different topics that we could spend the whole panel just talking about those. So I'm going to pass it on to Rob now to talk a little bit more about nutrition also in agriculture, and bring in lastly that message again of defeating the climate crisis before we wrap up and go on to takeaways.
Sure. Yeah, I love this question because as someone who started, I studied nutrition and then became an activist in terms of human health, and eventually started to think, wow, that's so much more selfish than thinking about the big picture of our environmental health. And then finally clicked in me that these really are the exact same conversation. And I mean that truly. Planet health is human health. The same solutions that we need to focus on for our environment are the things that are going to make us healthier, and vice versa. So when we think about nutrition and its effect, the effect that it has on us, it really comes back to these farming practices. And what's happening now is we've created in our conventional models ways that we can grow food by overstimulating them. And you could think of it like taking steroids to kind of have this falsified version of growth, but we grow almost what I think of as like a silhouette of plants, of what they once were. So we can imagine, there's something that looks like a broccoli or it looks like a carrot, but even just as far as 40 years ago, some of these crops are, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% or more depleted in minerals of what they once had just 40 years ago. And the reason is because we're just adding a very limited mindset of inputs. For those familiar with agriculture, it's NPK. And these are, we just pump nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and to get this growth. But these are synthetic fertilizers for the most part. They come from fossil fuels, which then has its own, of course, number of problems. But what we're doing is we're missing the plethora of minerals and vitamins and life force that would actually be growing healthy food. So when we grow these crops and these empty crops, these empty calories, when we consume them, we're missing that nutrient density. So when we're looking at human health, it's how much nutrients I'm actually getting for the food that I'm putting in. And that is one of the real key secrets to health overall, getting those minerals back into our body. So even when we look at organic agriculture, that many people know is free of pesticides and is a healthier choice than conventional, that stuff has been shipped, as we've been talking about, sometimes across the country, sometimes around the world. So it's been sitting on the shelf for how long, sitting on a truck for how long? And food starts to lose its healing power from the moment that it's picked. Right? Nature never intended for things to wait days and days and days and days and days if they are not being preserved properly. So these foods and these greens and these vegetables that are sitting on the shelf, even at a wonderful organic market, what has it lost in that time? And it's lost a lot of things beyond vitamins and minerals, but also its healing capacity. I told you I live in the city, if you just heard a motorcycle blast by me. So we're losing all these antioxidants and some of the phytochemicals and phytonutrients that are present in plants from the moment that you pick them. So this is why growing food yourself is so powerful. It's not just good for the planet, but you're going to be getting food as close to picked as humanly possible, because it starts to oxidize from the time that it's picked. So there's so much complexity in that. But ultimately, the beautiful thing is when we support the systems that are regenerative, the whole point of it is that they're going to be growing in a more healthy, ecological, biological way that is going to then reflect in what we consume, and we will be healthier and happier and all those wonderful things. So it's a great question to think about, that human health is planet health, and they need to be more overlapping, I think, in the environmental conversation and the people that are talking about health, right? These solutions are so intertwined.
Thank you, Rob. I think that's a great wrap up on the real content topics, and I want to pass it on to Coach and then to Megan to give us some takeaways. If people are interested now in organic and sustainable agriculture, how can they get involved, Coach?
So simple. Do something. Do anything. but do something. The easiest thing probably to do is backyard composting. Back to Rob's point about eliminating food waste from the landfill. Divert all your food waste from the landfill, and we have an opportunity to make a difference in terms of, the carbon output. It's one of those things that needs some education. People don't know what composting in their backyard is all about. It's pretty simple. We should have another forum specifically on how to do that, because if you do it wrong, you don't compost, you putrefy, and it smells really bad and your neighbors are going to hate you. So we want to do it correctly, and there's a way to do it, and I think that's something that we should be discussing ongoing. And I just appreciate the fact that I now have Vermin Nerd, Soil Geek, and Worm Whisperers as new t-shirts that I can sell at conferences.
That is great.
There you go.
Actually, Rob, someone was asking how they can buy a Compost This Cool shirt, if you want to quickly say that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll give a quick plug. This wasn't really my intention, but we tried to make the most environmentally friendly t-shirts of all time, and I still hope that it is. If anyone finds anything cooler, let me know. These are totally organic. They're actually carbon neutral certified. They're sweatshop free. They're made to order. There's no plastic. And we donate to plant a tree for every shirt sold and regenerate a square foot of degraded soil through our friends at the Carbon Underground. And we also donate to a beautiful nonprofit in Boston called the Urban Farming Institute. That's one of the most food desert areas that needs nutrition really badly. And the work that they're doing is phenomenal. So you can get those at Nature Supply Co. It's just a fantastic company that, when I saw the work that they were doing and I just finished this movie, The Need to Grow, I said, hey, we need to partner, because if I'm ever going to do a shirt, people were asking for shirts, I want it to be as absolutely environmentally friendly. So I believe they're technically carbon negative with the work that we're doing in the donation side. So I think that's kind of exciting. So naturesupplyco.com, or you can go to The Need to Grow or our Instagram, and there's some links there. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Just had to tell the people.
It's a good way to start a conversation, I think, with people. We've had people say just wearing a Compost is cool shirt is how we spread the message. That was really the point of it, right? It's not just to sell useless merchandise and to get, more clothes out into the world that people don't need if you don't need a shirt. But how do we get the conversation to be accessible to people? And sometimes just walking into a coffee shop and being able to then connect with someone who was also a compost nerd or a vermin nerd, but you would have never known because you were staring at your phone the whole time. But now we go, hey, I like compost too, right? Now you connect with someone in your community. So that to me was much more of what it was about, is connecting with people and trying to get those conversations going.
Great. I know we're a little bit over, so I've included in the comments for our Facebook and our YouTube some takeaways from Jones Valley Teaching Farm to please follow them. They're doing amazing work. And I'm also going to pass it on to Megan to say some individual takeaways in terms of individual action that people can take moving on from this panel.
Yeah, thank you, Lana. I was going to say I love those shirts. Now I need to go check out and get one of them. But I just want to emphasize the point that Coach made, which was that every single action makes a difference. And I think a lot of the conversations that I've had with people before is the idea that you don't know every single in and out about gardening. You don't know, every single in and out about agriculture, that I just can't get started, or that I'm not living a vegan, zero waste lifestyle, that I'm not doing anything to help the planet. But that is completely false. And there's so many little changes that you can make in your everyday life. And, if 1 million or 1 billion people are making those changes, that really makes a huge impact. So just starting there. But for some more specific takeaways, like I said, I think right now, given COVID and everything going on, is kind of the perfect time to start a garden. And don't be afraid to do it. If you don't have a large plot of land, like I was saying, you can start a container garden. There's so many ways to just try it out and just get more involved in kind of the gardening agricultural space. also just checking out some of the local farms near you, supporting them and supporting local farming and agriculture and food as much as you possibly can. And also, as mentioned, just supporting all these local nonprofits or farms, whether it's the ones on this panel or ones near you that are working to combat a lot of these problems that we mentioned, is incredible. And I think lots of nonprofits are always looking for new team members, looking for new volunteers. So if you can kind of join into those, if you're not interested in gardening, but just interested in learning more about the space, I think what Lana just kind of shared, you can get into curriculum development, you can get into working on a blog and just kind of, start learning via all these different avenues and kind of build your way up. But I think starting somewhere is so, so important.
Thank you so much, Megan. And if anyone has to leave, I know we're a little bit over, that's perfectly fine, but we're going to go on a little bit longer since it seems like you are really interested in continuing the conversation. And I'm going to pass it on to Elizabeth for a little bit to talk about some more important topics in terms of community justice and smallholder farms. And just spread some more information for anyone who can stay longer. Elizabeth, I believe you're muted.
Sorry about that. Okay, really great conversation, really appreciating everyone who's on here. Thanks so much. I also just wanted to talk a little bit about, because I know I've linked to it a little bit, talking about small farms versus large farms. And part of the reason that I say that, I mean, my background, I did a couple of years of working in agricultural communities in West Africa, and then did public health work on the East Coast, and then came out here and we started this. But it's really interesting, if you actually look at global food, we're sort of fed information to believe that, big farms are feeding the world. 70% of the world's population is actually fed by small farmers, farmers, fisher people, ranchers, so forth and so on. And in terms of farmers, what that means is on people on 2 acres or less. And this, I think, is really, really cool, because not only are those people really feeding the world, they're feeding themselves and their families and their communities, but if you look at those people, they're using far fewer resources to do it. If anybody really wants to dive and geek out on this, I get some of my data from organization called the ETC group, which gets it from World Health Organization and UN and things like that. But 80% of our natural resources used for ag are used for sort of this more industrial, large-scale ag, versus only 20% are used for small farms that, like we just said, are feeding 70% of the world. And of those small farm holders, not only are they producing more food, but they're using far fewer natural resources, be that fuel, be that water, be that land, so forth and so on. They're using far more varieties, like 2 million varieties, versus more industrial. It has far fewer, sometimes even GMO varieties and so forth. And then even better than that, I think smallholders, about 43% of those farmers are women, versus industrial, it's about half of that at 22%. And in the United States, we just really have a lot of large farms. Part of that is the subsidies and so forth. But let's be honest, a lot of it came from plantations. I mean, we started off by using slave labor to build these really big plantations. And I think a little bit of that is starting to come out with this awesome racial justice movement that's happening right now. And we're starting to learn and recognize and spread that information. And we just need to continue to do that and see that it permeates our food and our farming system as well. And, we started out with large plantations and slave labor. And honestly, if you look at a lot of the large farms, if they're either mechanized with big tractors doing the labor and getting people out of it, and then we have people who don't have work, or we're still somewhat doing slavery with immigrants who are being brought in and not treated well and so forth. So just wanted to bring this up also. If you look at, like, in 1910, we've never had a good percentage of people of color who have been farmers, but in 1910, 14% of farmer owners were Black, and now it's 1.5%. So we need to help move this in the other direction if we want to have, I believe, more sustainable agriculture, having more people involved and their communities and feeding their families and so forth. And I think all of this is wrapped in together.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think those are really important topics to talk about as well in this conversation. And just the takeaway is not industrial agriculture. That's not what we want. We really need to change our food systems for so many different reasons. And Megan, I'm actually going to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned some of the great work that the Urban Garden Initiative is doing and how people can get involved. Do you want to quickly tell the people about that before we wrap up again?
Thanks, Lana, for this. So yeah, I just wanted to throw out to everyone that we have a number of public programs kind of going on, especially now, virtual programming that anyone who's listening and wants to get involved in can kind of plug into. For example, actually this Saturday, we are having a youth environmental webinar that will feature 6 or 7 different youth-led environmental initiatives, kind of discussing many of these issues more in a broader environmental sense than just kind of agriculture. But that's one event that we have going on. And then every single Sunday at 6 p.m. EST throughout the month of August, we're doing a variety of public environmental workshops. Each week is going to be a different topic. So the first one's going to be actually on container gardening and sustainability, but we'll have other climate activists and kind of just leaders within the environmental movement kind of joining into that. If people want to check out our Instagram or our website, you'll always hear kind of these various new projects we have going on, or you personally want to volunteer or get more involved in Tubi as well. Yeah, those are all kind of there on our website.
Thank you. And I'll give Gabby also a chance. I mentioned in the comments for our live streams that you have Instagram that they should follow, but can you tell them what that Instagram is and how else they can learn more?
Yes, so our Instagram is Jones Valley's Teaching Forums. They just type that into the search and it should pop up. And what we post on our Instagram is basically what we are doing in the schools and with our children. This summer, we just finished our virtual Camp Grow lessons. So we have plenty of posts about Camp Grow and all the different things that the children learned and the different recipes and the different chefs and agriculture people that they met. Also, we did in the beginning, maybe March, we started doing virtual lessons. So we did some on worm whisperings and the importance of cultivation. We also did some culinary videos. So these videos are out for everyone to see, and you can use them to teach and show to your youth at home. And we also post on our blog, which you can find in the link at the Instagram bio, of what we're doing on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and what our next steps are.
Thank you. Yes, definitely follow them. Definitely follow both of those amazing organizations. And Rob, I'm going to hand it off to you again to tell people some more takeaways and wrap this up.
Sure. Yeah, this panel is called Agricultural Solutions, right? So we need to be in that frame of mind, and particularly now, even before the latest crisis, we've been facing so many ecological disasters and rising rates of chronic disease around the planet, and so much doom and gloom, and that's so much of what we hear. But the key is to think about, where do we go from here? And it's not just in a fight or flight, fear-based response, but it needs to be on educating ourselves and empowering ourselves and focusing on the future that is possible. These things are not theoretical. They just don't get quite as much talk, and they don't get quite as much spotlight and attention in mainstream media or just in news in general of the conversation, because we're programmed in our neurology to think, wow, there's disaster here, we got to focus. But we need to start envisioning this future. And so when we're looking at how we're going to create sustainable forms of agriculture, we actually want to take it one step further into regeneration, and not just maintaining what we have, which is a really, life support level system globally right now. But we need to actually start to rebuild human health and planet health at the same time. So what a beautiful gift that we've been given for many of us to be able to focus on anything other than food and water and shelter, right? We get very lost and caught up in our day-to-day, but especially during this time, we've been given this opportunity to refocus on what is truly valuable. And nothing really will matter much if we don't have access to food and water. So this is very far from being just a niche idea, or, oh, so-and-so is into gardening, or so-and-so is into environmentalism. But these are the things that really connect us all, right? These are the foundational life support systems that we all, unfortunately, take for granted to some extent. So how do we start to just take a moment of gratitude for the food that we consume, who grew it, thinking about where it came from, what am I going to do with that waste? But these life support systems at the most foundational level, so often keep coming back to soils. That's why it's so important, and it's not a niche thing, but it needs to become part of the greater awareness, because as we've talked about, it's our sense of community and how we connect with people and educate, and the mental health benefits that come from just putting your hands in the soil. And there's a lot of beautiful science there about reducing depression. And the people that live the longest in the world are the cultures that are actually out there and engaged and connected with their foods. We have healthier food because it's closer to us. We're reducing our impact and not polluting and putting our food to landfill. We're supporting those farmers that are actually building biodiversity. And at the same time, along all of this, we're actually sucking down carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it back underground, so that we will just continue to have this positive feedback loop and rebuild. And once you get that snowball going and positive thinking and positive momentum, even on a small piece of land or in your own backyard, or potentially even on a windowsill, in an apartment, you can start getting focused on solutions. And if we don't focus on solutions, talk about them constantly, how will they ever happen, right? They'll never be implemented to the scale if we're not talking about them specifically. So anytime that anyone's bringing up a problem, just ask yourself, hey, can we piggyback and talk about the solution on that too? Otherwise, I don't know what good it's doing for people anymore. We've heard about so many problems. I don't need to see, another picture of disaster if I don't know what I can do, right? Or what I have done to put it in that problematic state. That's only going to further paralyze me. So let's be careful as we move forward and talk about environmentalism in the future with, on social media, in our conversations, that we're really looking at what can I do? Otherwise, we're missing the bigger piece. Raising awareness with the problem is a big part of it, but now we need to shift into what we're going to do about it. So I invite you guys to continue being interested. Thank you to everybody who's here, who's doing this work. And it's just an honor to connect with people that care about this, because we'll see the trend as more and more people start to, because it makes sense. And it's all we have is this one planet. So keep up the good work. Keep talking about solutions.
Thank you. And this also connects to regeneration, right, Coach?
Yes, there's a struggle with exactly what regeneration means. And I think we came up with a pretty good tagline for what regeneration is really all about. And here's what we, as Cultivate America, think is the best way to describe regeneration. Making today better than yesterday, every day. Making today better than yesterday, every day. And that can be referred to soil, agriculture, relationships. I mean, what if you and your partner, your spouse, make today better than yesterday, every day? That's regenerative relationships. And of course, that explodes when you talk about agriculture and soil. So Cultivate America, we represent the intersection between food, agriculture, climate, and civic engagement. And what we want to do is make each of those 4 pillars of our organization better today than they were yesterday, every day.
Thank you so much, Coach. I think I'll leave it right there. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you aren't already following Cultivate America on Instagram and Facebook, you should definitely do that. And also check out all of these other amazing organizations that we have here represented with us today. Thank you all for joining.